going to start with a quote. Guy Kawasaki, who was the marketing manager for Apple back in the 90s, said, you've got to make evangelists, not sales. If you build a community around your evangelism, you're not forcing it. You're not forcing your customer to take the sales. Build a community and sales will follow. So I'm a wine guy, I'm a wine geek, and I'm also a salesman. And those don't always go together. So I'm going to tell you a story about a winery. Two guys went to Tulane University in the 90s, graduated C averages. After graduation, best friends, they parted ways. One goes off to New York City, Wall Street, makes a ton of money. The other guy goes to Guatemala, teaches organic farming to the farmers down there, and joins a Peace Corps. He comes back after the Peace Corps mission. They get together, and the guy says, look, I've got this big pile of money. What do you want to do? And he says, well, let's go buy a winery. Makes sense. So they go out to California, they start shopping. They shop for vineyards and wineries up and down the coast. But instead, they come home with a mountain. So they went for a winery, they bought a mountain. Spent a little more than expected, but it is okay. And they bought a mountain for two reasons. First, on this vineyard, or on this mountain was a vineyard. Very old Jefferson clone Merlot vines. Jefferson clone is that same clonal material that Thomas Jefferson brought back from Bordeaux at the end of the 18th century. So a pretty special place. Secondly, by buying the entire mountain, they had full control over the agriculture. And this is important for an organic farmer. So they bought this mountain, turned it over to organic farming, put solar panels around water retention ponds. They brought in sheep, and they brought in hawks and owls to keep the pests away. And they built a very small winery, not some sort of testament to an ego like you might see in Napa, but a very small, low-profile, 3-floor winery. This is important. The entire winery is built on gravity flow. This is a very gentle technique for winemaking. No pumps, no hoses. So the wine starts at the top of the winery, works its way down, ends in the cellar in the barrel room. And I think somebody here has been to visit that winery. I just noticed Paula. So I've just told you a story about a winery. We haven't talked about how the wine tastes. We haven't tasted the wine. Actually, if this was a tasting, not a talk, this is when the fun would begin. But so I've painted this portrait of these people, the history, and a piece of land, and I haven't even gotten into the wine yet. And what I'm trying to say is the story is important. The story of how the wine got there is important. And in sales, maybe it's the only thing saving us. So my history as it relates to wine starts here in Toledo. When I was growing up, my father owned a restaurant. So when I turned 16, that meant I was a busboy. And I worked there through school, eventually studied film, decided I had to move to Southern California with my family. We moved out there, continued working in restaurants, and discovered pretty quickly that the film business kind of sucks. It's not much fun. And so there I am kind of stranded in Southern California and trying to decide what's next. I don't know if I want to work in restaurants my whole life, but I realized that I loved wine. And it kind of came to me all at once. I lived close to Santa Barbara wine country. So I worked my way up to sommelier and eventually went to work for a distributor. Wine Business 101. Distributors. 3-tier system. The way wine gets to you. It starts at the winery, is sold to a distributor. You guys probably mostly know about distribution. And then finally that distributor sells to the restaurant or retail. There's a finite amount of distributors. You rely on them to get the wine from A to B to C to U, which is D. So I went to work for a distributor, and in my mind, this is a challenge. Distributors, it felt like, focused on a lot of grocery store wines, and I felt like there was a lot of wine they were trying to sell that I just couldn't buy into. That just wasn't my thing. So I gave it a try. My wife kind of coaxed me into it and was able to convince me that, you know, you can do it your way. So I did, and I found out that there are some great stories to tell, and there's some great reasons to sell some of these wines, and it really gave me a chance to geek out. So I went to work for a distributor, and then I realized, you know what? All those reasons, that video that we watched about Toledo with Rudy's Hot Dog and the Mud Hens and the Rockets and everything about Toledo that we all love, we missed that. Our hearts dragged us back here. So we decided to move back home. Now, moving from California to Toledo to sell wine kind of feels like swimming against the current. What we found out was it was a delicate balance. It's a great wine community, but I had to find the right distributor, and I did, and it worked out great for a while. And we were here for 4 years, 2004 to 2008, before the recession hit. And the recession hit, it made everybody kind of crazy and stupid. Everybody stopped selling wine they loved and started representing wines they resented. And this is a real sea change, and really, kind of befuddled me, and it kind of left me as an island out there. I was trying to figure out, what am I going to do next? This is exactly what I wanted to avoid, and every distributor changed this way. So I kind of said, look, I have to go back. I have to kind of reinvent my wheel. So I kind of sat down, and I started going online, and I found TED, actually. And I was inspired by a ton of talks. And that first quote I mentioned from Guy Kawasaki from Apple, making evangelists, not selling. That's important. Creating enthusiasm through stories and the quality of what you're selling changes everything. You're not selling anymore. You're just turning people onto something. So that was something I was able to buy into. So I said, there's these wineries I love that are kind of struggling in the current economy. What if I reach out for them and see if they need some help? And sure enough, the bandwidth for the distributors was finite. They didn't have enough attention for the small guys. They're all hustling, trying to sell to grocery stores. So I called up 12 of my favorite wineries and a few importers. And I said, look, I really want to do this. I want to represent you in this area. And they said, well, where are you going to sell the wine? The standard breakdown is we'd have a national sales manager. They go to 50 states. I'm like, well, I think I'm going to do 2. So I'm going to do Ohio and Michigan, but I'm going to do a really good job. And they said, all right, we'll try it. So instead of having just one winery and 50 states, I have 2 states and 12 wineries. So I was able to kind of flip it over. And what's happened is I'm 4 years in, I was able to build a little bit of a community around it. Rather than selling widgets, which is what wine had turned into, I was able to turn this back into sort of the thing I got into it for in the first place, that story that was always so important to me. So Toledo, while there's limitations, I kind of felt like if I was able to be creative, I was able to do what I wanted, live where I wanted to live, and sell what I wanted to sell. So thank you for your time.